What could be the consequences of President Trump offending Catholics and insulting the Pope? It's not only the largest Christian denomination, it's also growing in popularity. And still, President Trump has managed to upset Catholics around the world, posting outrageous memes and telling Pope Leo he's not a fan. So is Trump alienating his own base and driving allies away? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Well, there has never seemed to be a limit to what U.S. President Trump could say or do. Whether it was claiming he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose any voters, or threaten to kill an entire civilization, Trump has managed to win elections and stay in power. But now he's gone up directly against the Pope, a fellow American and the spiritual leader of more than 1.4 billion people. And this time, it seems Trump supporters are making fewer excuses for his behavior. Here's a look.
As the standoff with Iran continues, Donald Trump is taking aim at an unlikely opponent, Pope Leo. The US president has publicly attacked the Pope, calling him weak and accusing him of criticizing a war he says he was elected to fight. He also escalated the row online, posting an AI-generated image of himself as a Jesus-like figure. The post quickly drew backlash, including from parts of Trump's own religious base, and was later taken down.
Well, it wasn't depiction. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support.
Pope Leo has become increasingly vocal over the war in Iran, first criticizing the rhetoric surrounding it, and now condemning what he calls violations of international law.
By respecting the dignity of everyone and allowing yourselves to be moved by the pain of others, instead of multiplying misunderstandings and conflicts, you can surely become protagonists of a new chapter in history. Today, this is more urgent than ever in the face of continuous violations of international law and neo-colonial tendencies.
The Pope's remarks address the war as a question of law, legitimacy, and limits. And that difference in framing points to a deeper disconnect between Washington and the Vatican.
Yeah, I don't think President Trump understands the Vatican. Certainly the Vatican is a complicated institution. It's the oldest diplomatic corps in the world, and it works discreetly and behind the scenes. And that's just a complete opposite to President Trump's style, which is sort of in-your-face style diplomacy. And so in that sense, they're oil and water.
This is not new. Trump has clashed with the papacy before, and at times mocked it, including posting an AI image of himself as Pope. His tensions with the Vatican go back years. In 2016, Pope Francis criticized his immigration plans, saying building walls instead of bridges was not Christian, a remark Trump called disgraceful. Those disputes centered on migration and eventually faded. This time it's different, because the disagreement is not about policy, but about a war and its legitimacy. That question is not only dividing Washington and the Vatican, it is visible inside the US administration itself. US Vice President J.D. Vance, a practicing Catholic, is reported to be among those least supportive of the war on Iran. Others are taking a different line. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, a born-again Christian, has used religious language in support of the war, including references associated with the Crusades. That language extends beyond official messaging to figures linked to Trump, including Peter Thiel, co-founder of Palantir, whose systems have been used by the US military in Iran. He recently held private lectures on the Antichrist in Rome, drawing scrutiny from Catholic circles. And the divide is now extending beyond Washington.
Those statements, particularly regarding the pontiff, were unacceptable. I expressed and continue to express my solidarity with Pope Leo. I'll tell you more. Frankly, I wouldn't feel at ease in a society where religious leaders do what political leaders tell them to do.
Meloni's support for the Pope aligns with her position on the war. After refusing to join US strikes on Iran, she was criticised by Trump, who said she lacked courage. What began as a dispute over Iran is now extending beyond it, between Washington and the Vatican, and across those aligned with each.
So joining me now to look at the potential fallout of the President Trump-Pope Leo rift are from Washington, editor at the Catholic media platform Where Peter Is, Mike Lewis. From New York, president of the Catholic League, Bill Donohue. And from Tampa, Florida, Republican strategist, Matt Tito. Thanks all so much for being with me. Mike, I'll start with you as a Catholic. How is all of this making you feel? Is it just President Trump being President Trump, or has he finally gone kind of beyond an unspoken limit?
Well, speaking as a Catholic, I think that the level of decorum in between the church and the state seems to have declined quite a bit. Obviously, for the president to call out the Pope directly and to hurl attacks on him is, I don't think we've seen anything like this in our lifetimes. The memes on top of that, I don't think he has any sense of how offensive that might be. Putting out an image of himself in the role of Jesus, although he claims it was, he thought it was a doctor. But I mean, that would be offensive to not just Catholics, but to Christians of all denominations, which is the majority of the United States. So I think it's been shocking to some people, although some Catholics seem to not, they do have that it's Trump being Trump attitude.
Personally, how did you feel, though, when you saw those memes? Yeah, go ahead.
I have to say it was a new low for me. I did not know he could go that low, but he outdid himself once again, and it was shocking to me.
Okay. Bill, what were your feelings, and would you agree with what Mike's analysis was?
Well, I put out a statement yesterday going after Trump for some of his reckless comments and also questioning some of the comments made by the Pope in criticism of Trump. But with regard to the picture, I labeled it to be offensive and immature. And obviously, he was portraying himself as Jesus, so he lied about that. I'm not going to make any exceptions for him. And if I've dealt with this kind of subject before with other personalities, maybe not presidents, but certainly people in high places who have played these kinds of games before, and then they try to claim that that we don't understand their sense of humor. No, I know exactly what they meant, and Trump was wrong on this.
Bill, just to be clear, you had been, and maybe you still are, a staunch Trump supporter. I mean, did this cross a line for you politically and where you stand on your support for President Trump?
No, it doesn't. I think he's been wrong on a number of different issues, but I certainly support him and not the bishops or the Pope when they claim that we should not have mass deportations. Mass deportations were abetted by having mass invasions. Where was the Pope? Where were the bishops in the United States criticizing 20 million people crashing the borders, illegal aliens, which created this mess in the first place? So, no, I'll stand by him, and he's done more for religious liberty than any president. We had a Catholic president and his predecessor who was against the Catholic Church's teachings on abortion, marriage, sexuality, and right down the line. And we didn't hear too much from the Vatican. So I have to weigh Trump's offensiveness with the silence on the part of Rome and the bishops in this country on many other things that Catholics kept waiting for them to address, but they never did.
Okay, Matt, where do you see the two positions you just heard? And do you think President Trump should have kind of picked this latest battle with the Pope and the Catholic Church?
Well, this certainly isn't anything new for President Trump. Remember, if you remember in the past, in 2016, he got into a rift with Pope Francis. So this seems to be a trend for Trump. I think Trump sees himself as a Pope-type figure in American politics, and maybe the most powerful politician who's ever lived. And so he sees himself as somebody either on the Pope's level, or if not even more important in terms of the history of humanity. And so when he does things like this, I think that he's just joking around. I think he's trying to get, a reaction out of people. I think his rift with the Pope is a separate issue from the picture that he posted, which I think most Catholics and Christians alike all condemned it equally, and that's the reason why President Trump took it down. So I think that in the future he needs to be a little bit more careful about what he posts. But in terms of the rift with the Pope, I think that's something natural for President Trump. I think listen, in America, I think if you polled Trump versus the Pope in a head-to-head matchup, I think Trump's probably up 60 to 70 points over the Pope. That's how popular he is, especially with his base in the United States.
Let me ask you though, Matt, I mean, you said the majority of Christians condemned that picture, but do they forgive it?
I think people move on very quickly, and they'll forgive it, they'll forget it, and they'll move on because there's more important things pressing us here in the United States that we need to take care of and focus on.
Okay. Mike, do you agree?
It depends on which Catholic. If you look at Catholics make up 20 to 25% of the United States. That's self-identification. The Catholic vote tends to be a bellwether. Basically, every election, I think, since 1972, with the exception of 2000, which was a very close election, the Catholic vote has gone with the winner. I think that this is damaging. I mean, popes and presidents have disagreed before. We had a situation where Pope Benedict and President Barack Obama were in conflict with each other on a lot of Catholic teachings, and there was a level of respect and a level of decorum between the two as world leaders. The Vatican does not see itself as an adversary to any country. Basically, the Pope is always going to stand up in favor of peace. The Pope is always going to stand up in favor of the poor and the marginalized, and yes, the migrant. The U.S. bishops are united on this issue.
Mike, yeah,
yes.
I need to move on to something else, just because the clock is against us, because it's also not just President Trump coming down on the Vatican. Explain what seems to be a kind of deeper, darker level of coordination here. We've got Peter Thiel, for example, he's the co-founder of Palantir, giving private lectures in Rome on the Antichrist. Is there something else to be read into in terms of something larger going on among Republicans and right-wing politicians between the Vatican?
Well,
Go ahead.
I don't think I would paint it as a huge overarching conspiracy theory, but I think what we really are seeing is an ideological opposition, an ideological project. And especially since the beginning of Pope Francis's papacy back in 2013, but continuing through Pope Leo, there's been a post-liberal current. Peter Thiel's vision is for it sort of blends technological futurism with Christian eschatology. And so his private lectures in Rome suggest that there are people in and around the Vatican who support this type of worldview. And so it's not compatible necessarily or at all with the social vision that Pope Leo XIII and Francis have been pushing forward. They have been promoting peace. They have been promoting fraternity. They have been promoting the cause of human dignity. One thing that is very key to the worldview of all the popes, really, and of Catholic social teaching, is to say that human beings are not the means to an end, or they must be the end. So we can't just kill people or force people out of the country violently. We have to respect them as persons first. And this view that it just seems very strange, especially the secrecy surrounding the Peter Thiel lectures, which were by invitation only, and people had to turn in their cell phones before they walked into the room.
Let me get Bill in there and ask what you think about that potential layer as well. And also remember, Steve Bannon was kind of caught in the Epstein files talking about taking down Pope Francis as well.
Yeah, listen, I spend more time going against the people who are bashing the church who overwhelmingly are on the left. There's no question about that. But there are clearly nut jobs on the right that I've also targeted. Bannon has gone off the rails. There's no question about that. As soon as Robert Prevost became Pope Leo, he started attacking him. It was some kind of a anti-MAGA conspiracy. So there are people like that. I don't even bother giving the time of day, even though he is a man of some influence. So yeah, there are a lot of people on the left and the right who have discredited themselves on this. But I must say this, I was very disappointed when Pope Francis invited in Sister Janine Gramick, a woman, a nun, who has absolutely condemned the Catholic Church's teachings on sexuality, particularly homosexuality. She herself was chastised by the Vatican and the bishops in this country. He gave her a platform. Pope Leo welcomes in Gareth Gore. Gareth Gore, I read his book on Opus Dei. I'm not an Opus Dei person, but I read the book. It's one of the most anti-Catholic books I've read in some time and was strewn with lies, historical errors, and the Pope gave him 40 minutes. So this raises the eyebrows of Catholics who we like the Pope, but it raises our eyebrows when we see him do these kinds of things, just like his predecessor.
As far then, Bill, let me ask you about those who are seem to be displeased with him or with taking what they think is some kind of political stance. You know, some Pope supporters have pointed out that he only really touches on politics when politics touch core gospel values. So given he sees this war as unjust and immoral, he would need to speak out according to Catholic doctrine itself. Is that not true?
Oh, I think that's right. And I disagree with Vance, whom I ordinarily like, but when he said that the Pope should stick to matters of morality, what does he think war is? It's a matter of morality. The problem that a lot of Catholics have with this Pope, in terms of what you've just said, is that he's very pointed in criticizing Trump. Francis and all the ones before him, they would make general kind of comments. You kind of read between the lines when they weren't too happy with the president. This Pope here does seem to be much more pointed in his criticism of the president. And given the abrasiveness of Trump, it's almost natural that the sparks would fly. So I think that the cooler heads need to prevail on all sides.
Okay. Matt, Bill alluded to Vice President J.D. Vance, and I wanted to ask you about that, because what does Trump's rift with the Pope actually mean for the relationship he has with the Vice President? J.D. Vance is a devout Catholic who is reported to be slightly, at least now, well, he had been, he advised against this war. So now they've got a double take here. Not only did they disagree politically on what to do, but now ideologically and religiously, they're on a different page.
Yeah, and you already saw J.D. Vance come out and support President Trump with the post and support him throughout all of this, saying it was just a joke. So I think that's going to continue. I think J.D. Vance is going to support President Trump through his policies, being his right-hand man as the vice president. And we're going to continue to focus on bigger things that we need to get done here in America and around the world. You know, you saw J.D. Vance was over in Pakistan trying to broker a peace deal with this Iran war. He's on board with the president 100%. I don't see him, you know, going away from the president or turning on the president at any time. And look, I think the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, of course, but it's kind of a relic of the past. I don't think that anybody actually listens to the Pope here in America, especially MAGA Republicans. I think they would take Trump's word over the Pope's word. People don't like to be lectured to. They don't like to be told what to do, you know, ethically how to act, morally how to act. You know, they believe in what they believe in. And, you know, most MAGA Catholics, you know, their top priorities are, you know, the economy, security, immigration, things like that. And, you know, some of those issues, especially immigration, the Pope goes against. And it's easy for him to say when he lives in a castle behind, you know, behind walls and security, and he's safe. And then your average American has illegal immigrants killing people in their neighborhoods. And so, you know, your average Catholic American's like, look at this guy over here. You know, how is he telling me what to do or what the right policy is in my country when he lives like a king? So people just don't even care what the Pope says anymore. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, Mike, I saw your eyebrows go up a couple times on that statement. But let me ask you as well. I just want to get one final issue in with you, because J.D. Vance is one point of this. He's a Catholic. It seems contradictory to be in favor of the president's policies while he says he's a devout Catholic. But Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, also says he's a Christian, and he also cites the gospel to defend the fight. And then there's this divide now between, okay, well, he's using the Old Testament only to justify this war. The Pope uses the New Testament. I mean, does it highlight a real divide then as well between Catholics and evangelicals?
Yes, well, one conversation that's going on in Catholic circles is how the difference between how evangelicals and Catholics typically see the state of Israel. A lot of evangelicals see the state of Israel as having eschatological significance and being basically rebuilding the temple, and they see it as being part of the end times. There's a theological tie to it. They don't just see Israel as a political ally or as a nation state that they want to support, but they see it as part of their biblical worldview. Whereas I think the Catholic Church, while recognizing Israel, don't have that end times tie to it, and so I think there's actually a little bit of a rift within Trump's base, because I think a lot of Catholics, even if they aren't on board with Pope Leo or Pope Francis before him, they are made uncomfortable by these apocalyptic associations with the war that Hegseth is making, and I think you can see a little bit of that in J.D. Vance's response. You can tell that he's trying to walk a line. As the vice president, he feels that he needs to support the president, but he also has a spiritual memoir coming out in a few months or a few weeks, and he claims to be a devout Catholic, and so for him to back some of the things and to downplay some of the things that Donald Trump is doing, I don't know if the rift will widen. And
Okay, final issue and last 3 minutes. So I'm going to try and get Bill and Matt both of you in on this. We talked about alienating allies, and we've even got Bill Giorgia Meloni turning away from Trump. I mean, this was definitely a step too far for her. You don't go after the Vatican, you don't insult the Pope like that. And we already saw Italy negotiating separately for their own kind of trade deals with Iran, while the U.S. is asking European allies to help blockade the Strait of Hormuz. So is this dangerous for the U.S. relationship with its allies?
Well, it certainly doesn't help. I don't know if they'd use the word dangerous, but I would say that Meloni's been a great supporter and Trump is a supporter of her. He does a lot of things where he puts his foot in his mouth like he has this week on these things, and it's a real problem. Let me get back to something that Mike said here, though, about Hegseth. I'm concerned about Hegseth, and I'm a Trump supporter. I'm concerned about him and Doug Wilson. That's his pastor. His pastor is virulently anti-Catholic. And he has said that in the nation that he would envision, run by Protestants, that Catholics would not be allowed to walk down the street with a procession for our Blessed Mother. I don't need some Protestant or somebody else telling me what I can do as a Catholic on the streets in New York or any place else in honoring our Blessed Mother. So I think Hegseth needs to distance himself. I've dealt with other evangelicals in the past whom I have a good relationship in general. I say in general because I've had some real problems with some of the anti-Catholic elements there, and I don't want to see it create divisions. But if it does, my first allegiance is to the Catholic Church. I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I was a Democrat and I got fed up with them and I became a Republican. I got fed up with them. I've been happily independent now for about 30 years.
Okay. Final words then from Matt. We've got 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the Pope coming out against the war and saying that we shouldn't have any war, of course. I mean, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I've been to Afghanistan. I'm completely anti-war. I don't think we should be in any of these entanglements in the Middle East. But in a corrupt, evil world that we live in, sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to protect your country. And there is evil in this world, and you must face evil head on. And I think that's what the United States is doing. And I hope this war comes to a swift end, because the Pope is right on one thing, and that is we shouldn't be killing each other.
Okay. Matt, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for being with us, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.